Oh, sorry. Didn't know it went automatically live. Whew, that was quick. But yeah, welcome everybody live. And mostly I want to do this because I watched Toon Critics video, Toon Critics, what Two Critical 2K video on on the Sonic the Hedgehog movie and what he hopes for and what he's hoping for it to contain. But I also did this because I watched BobSheaux's Patreon exclusive video he did last year, and I don't know if anybody's kind of done something like this to help him out. I mean, I know I referenced suggested a couple of stories for him to review in the future as far as the comics go, but that was about it. That was about it. But what I saw on the Patreon exclusive, where he talked about the Sonic comic origins, he kind of really didn't touch too much upon the history because I don't think he knows too much about it. And then Linkara, of course, who's done several Sonic comic reviews already, two actually. He probably knows a little bit about it, but I'm sure Linkara, Lewis, Lovehog would like to know a little bit more. Amongst others, I know that are kind of curious as to as to why there's such a fandom, as to why fans are so behind this comic book adaptation of Sonic. And I know Chris Rael. I did a video where he responded, and I appreciate that, Chris, if you're watching. But in Chris Rael of IDW, that is. But I thought I'd kind of come out here and do a video. It's about 10:36 Pacific time in the morning, on the last day of August. So I thought I'd come out here and do this video and do it live so everybody could watch it. But anyway, I want to just come out here and give you guys a little bit of information. You see, the comics, in case you're wondering, excuse me for a second. I had to do something there. But the comics, for some of you that are wondering, actually started around mid to late 1992, and they started with a miniseries. This is one thing that Archie Comics did when they did the Knuckles comics as well. They did several miniseries before they finally gave him a 30-plus issue run with the comic. Excuse me. Trying to pop the ear here. Oh, whatever. But like I said, that's kind of what they did with the Knuckles spin-off comic that they had. They did like several miniseries to establish the world, which I'm pretty sure Ken Penders enjoyed. And before, and eventually they gave him, like I said, a 30-issue run, a 30-plus issue run, I believe, which was okay. I didn't read all the issues. Archie Comics did distribute at a time before, and I think during some legal issues they had with Ken, they distributed some of the archive books for Knuckles, and some of the stories contained I actually have physically the actual physical copies of. Like, the one thing about the Knuckles comic is you kind of would get a crossover somewhat, and one of the crossovers that he did was with Sally. Sally was the only character out of the main book to show up in the Knuckles comics, because that has something to do with, that basically had something to do with one of the main stories that tied into the book, into the main book, because one of the other stories that tied into the main book dealt with Antoine going with Jeffrey St. John to go retrieve Sally's brother Elias and her mother Queen Alina, or Alicia, I think. So that they did that. So they did that with that. So the Knuckles comic connected somewhat to the main comic in that way. But basically, Sally was given like a co-starring role. I think it was around issue 20 something, I believe. I think 29 or 28, ironically. And she was given like almost a co-starring role, co-headlining role, if you will. But yeah, the comics have been going since about the mid to late 1992, and officially got their own series with Archie around early to mid 1993, basically in time to kind of coincide with the debut of the Sonic Saturday morning cartoon series on ABC, as well as the more Looney Tunes, younger, more of the along with more of the Looney Tunes inspired, if not targeted at more of the younger audience show in Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. So basically, you had Sonic Sat AM, which, if you see the poster right there, was on ABC, and then coinciding with it, alongside the book, along with it, you had The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, which was a syndicated program that came out, I think, about a week or so before. And a little bit of history, a tidbit on that. I think somewhere read that, I think somewhere, I'm not really sure if this is correct, but somewhere I read that they were planning to put Adventures on ABC and Sat AM was probably going to head into syndication. But I don't know what happened. I don't know if ABC was what I think would happen if that's the case is they were presented with both, you know, plots and both story ideas or show ideas, and I think ABC told Dick Entertainment and Sega, we want the Sat AM one, not the Adventures one, because the Adventures one was a little too cartoony. And at the time, in the early to mid '90s, Saturday morning cartoons, especially if they were based on comics or video games, were more action oriented than comedic. I'm not saying Sonic Sat AM didn't have its comedic moments. It had its comedic moments. There's no doubt about that. It had its comedic moments, especially at the end, somewhat during, but it had its comedic moments. But at the time, between, like I said, the early to mid '90s, mostly like '93 to about '97, all the cartoons on Saturday mornings were more action oriented than than some of the shows that were on syndication or on cable television at that time. So I'm guessing, just my opinion, I'm guessing ABC decided to go with that more action-oriented route, which I think was a good idea. Now, that show lasted for about 2 years, on 2 seasons, and unfortunately, it didn't get a third season. The reason being, and Ben Hurst, late Ben Hurst, God rest his soul, Ben Hurst basically said that the new people at ABC came up with a saying that he had heard, but not actually heard someone say. And the saying that he heard, and it's pretty much irrelevant, not irrelevant, but pretty much relevant to any fan of Sonic Sat AM, who's gotten the box set of the series and whatnot, and has posted it here on YouTube and other online sharing sites. Uh, the saying that Ben Hurst heard being said amongst the groups around there at ABC and Dick Entertainment was percolate down a new broom sweeps clean. And what that meant was ABC wanted to sweep away some of the shows, live action, sitcoms, cartoons, what have you, of the old guard and establish what they wanted for the new guard. And this was also around the time that I think ABC was in negotiations to be bought by Disney and become part of the Disney family. The reason I say that, is because, ironically, about a year or so after, you had the Mighty Ducks, you had Gargoyles, the Goliath Chronicles, amongst others that got showcased on ABC, and I think you even had reruns of DuckTales, the original DuckTales, aired on ABC, along with reruns of Darkwing Duck. So that was around mid '96 to '97. So it's kind of ironic that those shows ended up on ABC at the same time Sonic Sat AM had been pushed to the wayside. Now, Sonic Sat AM didn't totally disappear. I think later on in '95, because February 1995, I know from personal experience, was the last time I saw the show broadcast on television. It was the last time I saw it because of the fact that a week later there was nothing more. All I saw instead of Sonic Sat AM, because the schedule I remember was Sonic Sat AM and then Free Willy. What I saw instead was like two back-to-back Free Willys. And I was like, what is this about? What's going on? So anyway, the hiatus, the shelf life for Sonic Sat AM didn't last too long. Ironically, USA Network, who was doing Cartoon Express at the time, uh, had bought the airing rights. It bought the rights, the broadcast rights to Sonic Sat AM and Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. They had bought the rights to it, so what happened was later in that fall of 1995, both Adventures and Sonic Sat AM ended up on the USA Network, but not as a part of Cartoon Express. Cartoon Express, for anybody that grew up in the 80s and early 90s, um, knows about the long 2 hour, 3 hour, 4 hour the long 2 hour, 3 hour, 4 hour block that it had. So what happened was it decided to evolve in a sense. Like I said, at the time between the early to mid 90s, a lot of shows, I mean, a lot of over the air broadcast channels and cable channels at times, or some cable channels anyway, were more focused on the action oriented programming in animation and sometimes live action. You know, this is why if you would watch something like Family Matters, why every now and then they would have an episode airing with Steve Urkel, Jaleel White's character, who Jaleel White voiced Sonic in both Adventures and Sonic Sat AM, as well as came back and voiced him in the Blue Core Studios fan-made film Sonic the Hedgehog, which I recommend you check out. Um, basically, what I'm getting at is basically at times, Family Matters would air an episode where Steve would use his transformation chamber. Now, long story short, they had established this little subplot in the show, in the Family Matters show, where Steve came up with this idea to create an alter ego of himself called Stefan, because he realized, okay, as myself, I'm not going to get Laura Winslow. I'm just going to be her friend, her confidant, but I'm not going to be her love interest. So he came up with this idea to turn himself into an alter ego called Stefan, and basically Stefan became the love interest of Laura Winslow. But the transformation chamber became more than just, oh, he's going to become Stefan. They came up with an idea to allow him to incorporate DNA of other famous people or other kind of personalities that he could tap into to kind of advance the plot of the story of the episode that was airing that night, that Friday night, because it was part of TGIF Fridays. So again, long story short, one of the DNA samples that he had was Bruce Lee. So like I said, this being at a time where a lot of cable channels and over-the-air broadcast networks were more focused on the action-oriented portion of of the business, of the media business, the Hollywood business, the television movie business. They decided to incorporate this um, this into Family Matters by having Steve once in a while, I think it was about 3 times, turn himself into Bruce Lee. He would turn himself or anybody with him into basically Bruce Lee. Basically he would use the DNA of Bruce Lee that he had obtained to mix with his, and he would become Bruce Lee, inheriting his or gaining his speech, the way he talked, and mostly his fighting ability, and of course his hairstyle at that time. So, and his iconic outfit, you know. But anyway, that's basically what. But anyway, like I said, that basically what they did with Family Matters. matters when it came to this action-oriented um, error, if you will, that that everybody was in during the early to mid 90s. I mean, it even affected Family Matters, which is why, as I was trying to say, USA Network came up with the idea to evolve their Cartoon Express, evolve it and rebrand it the Extreme Action Hour or the Extreme Action Team. And basically, what it would be about an hour and a half to 2 hours of action-oriented cartoons. And Sonic fit right in it. Whether it was Adventures or it was Sat AM, it fit right in it. It fit right in it alongside the Street Fighter cartoon they did, the Mortal Kombat cartoon they did, and even a few licensed cartoons that they had acquired as well, along with Sonic. So Sonic Sat AM, Sonic Sat AM was a part of that, as well as, like I said, Adventures was a part of that. And when I mean a part of that, what I mean as a part of it is the fact that the way they had it broadcast, if you will, is they did Adventures first, which is like 65 plus episodes, and then they did Sonic Sat AM. That's how they had it broadcast. Now, as great as that was to have Sonic Sat AM on 5 days a week, just like they do now on Stars, which, yeah, if you're curious, the Stars family of networks, either it's Stars Kids and Family or Stars Encore Family or Stars Encore, they have Sonic Sat AM on demand as well as broadcast over the air, broadcast on air when during the mornings or the early afternoons, like lunchtime or snack time, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, Stars has Sonic Sat AM. But getting back to what I was saying, the way USA had this worked out is Adventures would come on first. Sorry for the lag there. Adventures would come on first and would be broadcast first. And then after they finished broadcasting the cycle of Adventures, the run cycle, the episode cycle of Adventures, they would start doing the cycle, the 26 episode cycle, I should say, of Sonic Sat AM. And this, like I said, it was great and all to have it 5 days a week, if not 6 days a week. Because I think they also did it on Saturdays as well. The only problem though with it, and this is one thing a lot of fans complained about, and I noticed this as well. I noticed this as well because I would watch episodes of Sonic Sat AM that people would upload online that they had recorded off not ABC but USA. And what I noticed was there was a lot of what's called edit butchering. Or that's basically the term the fan base put out. A lot of butchering, a lot of editing. Basically, there was a lot of scenes, key scenes sometimes, that were cut out to make the episode fit within the allotted time slot or the assigned time slot. There was a lot of episodes that were cut out from the allotted time slot that, oh, not time slot, but basically there was a lot of scenes in key episodes, if not a majority of the episodes during the run on USA. There was several scenes that some fans have pointed out that were cut from the broadcast that was seen in the original broadcast on ABC, but were cut during the USA broadcast. And the reason I'm given, from what I understand, like I was saying, is was so that the show could fit in the allotted time slot, in the assigned time slot that it was given. So yeah, even though it was great even though it was great for the show to have a new home, to have a place to be shown and broadcast on with the USA Network, the bad thing was a lot of the episodes were not being shown as they originally aired. And I think Dick Entertainment and Sega got wind of this, and they pretty much ended the relationship with USA. The only thing that USA got out of this was they were the first ones to broadcast the world premiere of Sonic Christmas Blast, which was somewhat a hybrid of both Sonic SatAM and Adventures. Mostly done in the style of Adventures, except Sonic wasn't all like shiny or anything, and Tails wasn't a darker shade of brown in his fur, or Tails' fur wasn't a darker shade of brown. Instead, you had more like a hybrid design of them from Sonic SatAM, color scheme wise, to go with more of a Adventures style presentation. And SatAM was kind of referenced more in name, like with Robotropolis, which was Robotropolis, and the swap bots, even though they weren't the swap bots in SatAM, they were still referenced or called that in the special. And then, of course, the key one, the key element that a lot of fans were surprised about was Sally Acorn's inclusion. Sally actually Sally actually cameoed in this, non-speaking, although from what we understand, she was supposed to have a speaking role. And I think it was, believe it or not, Tabitha St. Germain, I believe, or somebody. I think it may have been her or somebody else that was supposed to do a little bit of a speaking role for her. All Sally got out of this, as far as any kind of vocalness, any kind of vocalness goes, was when at the end Sonic just drops a lot of presents he got for her on top of her, and all you hear is just kind of deal, like this like little oomph kind of like the oomph kind of thing when when Sonic just drops all the presents he got for her on top of her. That's all you hear out of her. You don't hear any other lines or anything, even though when Sonic and Tails go off to get her present, the one last thing you see is her going like this, like she's going to say something, and that's it. They cut away. So I think there were plans for her to speak, but Katsushi, who was working on Space Jam at the time as the voice of Lola Bunny, wasn't available. And I think, like I said, I don't know if it was Tabitha St. Germain or somebody else, I don't think was available either, or couldn't. Something happened, basically. But yeah, Sally cameoed in this in the first like 5 minutes and in the last 2 minutes. So basically, she was given a total airtime, a total on-screen time of at least 7 to 8 minutes. Go figure. But yeah, that's what USA was able to get out of it. That they would be the first ones to broadcast the Christmas special of Sonic SatAM, along with other Christmas specials that Dick Entertainment helped produce. But getting back on track here, as far as the comics go, the comics were kind of more like what Adventures was not well. Okay, the comics when they first started was kind of like what Christmas Blast was. It was kind of a hybrid, except as far as the designs of the characters go, they were more in tune with Sonic SatAM, although the story elements were more in tune with Adventures. It wouldn't be until about issue 15 that Sally would go from the pink, black hair or brown hair, whatever you look at it, kind of designed as she initially had, to her iconic Sonic SatAM look. Basically, in issue 15 she would go to this look, except for the vest. She would go to that look. Well, she had the vest on on the cover of issue 15, but she wouldn't go to that iconic look until about that time. What they did instead is they kept sort of her original design from the miniseries they did in '92, kind of revamped it a little bit to where she had a pink body and black hair, or kind of black hair like this, not full hair, but kind of like this. And then, like I said, around issue 15, they decided to incorporate her Sonic SatAM design instead. So they incorporated that. And they even, when she crossed over, like I mentioned earlier, with Knuckles, when she crossed over with Knuckles in one of his issues, they even had her explain why she went through those different recolorings and redesigns. Basically, long story short, what they had made up, or what Ken Penders, I think, who penned the story, made up was they were on a mission and she fell off a scaffold or a bridge or a scaffold bridge, whatever it was. Basically, long story short, what they came up with is she fell off a scaffold, a bridge, basically, when they were on a mission into a vat of chemicals. And even though the chemicals were poisonous, they had an effect on her to where she ended up having a different color fur every now and then. Like it would go from orange brown to pink, from blonde hair to black hair to eventually back to normal. They even explained in a comedic way that she took several, if not many, bubble baths, scrubbing all the toxins out of her hair and fur just to get herself back to normal. So yeah, it wouldn't be until about issue 15 that they would start incorporating Sally's actual SatAM design into the comics, even though the comics still stuck to a more comedic route. But that would start changing at least around the backstories of, I think, 18 and 19, and I think 17. That would start changing with those backstories, and ironically, those backstories focused on Sally, and that led us into the 48-page special, Sonic the Hedgehog, Sonic in Your Face, where the main story at the top of the comic, or the main story when you first read the comic, is a story that's kind of based off the adventures, the backup stories that we saw in the comics that followed. In the comics that followed, it was based off those, and then that led us into that ironically led us into a 3-issue miniseries for Princess Sally. Yeah, Sally actually had her own 3-issue miniseries, and it sold very well, from what I understand, and a lot of people like it. Even a guy called the Media Man on DeviantArt, his DeviantArt name is MixedFan8643. Even he liked the Princess Sally arc, felt it was paced out and done very well. Even though he's kind of been vocal about, how Sally's been written and portrayed in the comic over the past several years, if not decade. So yeah, it wouldn't really be until about almost the late. How do I put this? It wouldn't be almost until about the late 20s, in the late 20 issues, 30 issues, that the comic would take on a more SatAM, darker, more SatAM style tone. Like I said, you still had humor here and there, especially issue 29, which was the comic book debut of Dulcie the Dragon. You wouldn't have more. You still had a little bit more. What I'm saying is, you still had a bit of comedicness in there, and you would have that comedic humor on and off throughout the run of the comic. But as we got into the late 20 issues and more of the 30-ish issues and 40 and 50s, the comic started taking on more of that Sonic SatAM dark tone kind of storytelling. Even to the point that when we got into the 50th issues and the 60th issues and 70th issues, it was more dramatic, more action-paced, more action-packed, and more serious, and obviously meant to be more for an older audience than a younger audience. You could tell that the comics were basically evolving and growing with the audience that was growing up with, that basically were with them from the beginning. So what I'm trying to say is the comics were growing up with its audience. That's why from the start of the 30th issues up till, I say, towards the end, you had a more serious tone. You had more of a serious, more Satayam-like style tone. Again, I'm not saying you didn't have your comedic moments in there. You did. I'm not saying you didn't. But they started focusing more on the Satayam like storytelling, if not more darker storytelling and dramatic storytelling than what the comic originally started out as. So that was so that really showed that at a time the writing staff, the creative staff at Archie Comics, when the when the Sonic comics were a part of the Archie comic book family, were really listening and paying attention to the fans. Now, ironically, when you look at the 50th issues, when you get into the 40 issues, and then up to the 50th issue, that's when things start to really take a very dark turn, if not a more Satayam like turn as well. Not saying they didn't do that beforehand with the 30th and 40th and even 20th issues, and even the teen issues, the late teenish issues into the 20th issues. But when we got to the 40th issues and it became a little bit more darker, again, like I said, you still had a few comedic moments here and there when they felt they needed to lighten the mood, but and kind of give you that calm before the storm. But basically, it's when we started getting towards the 50th issue when things started to really pick up. Business. It's like uh, it's like Jim Ross would say anytime he felt that a big moment was about to happen or a big match was about to take place. He would say business is about to pick up. And that's exactly what was happening. Business was about to pick up. So as we got to the 50, so as we were counting down to issue 50, Ken Penders came up with this idea to do a story called Endgame. And with this story, he had originally planned to kill off Princess Sally. But what happened was, even though that was his original plan, and he had other plans to go along with it afterwards, Sally's popularity and importance to the fans, and sorry for the lag there, importance for the fans, as well as importance to Sega, proved to be a vital point in her remaining in the comic and in the franchise. Because what happened is Ken Penders had gotten a lot of negative feedback from the fans, if not mostly Sega. And I think one of the reasons he got negative feedback from Sega is he didn't get their approval to kill her off. See, Sally, whether people want to believe this or not, like Bunnie Rabbot, like Rotor, like Antoine, are Sega characters. They are properties of Sega Corporation. And whether or not they're in the games or they're not in the games, they're still Sega property. So Ken Penders did not get any permission to kill her off. So what happened is he had to rewrite the ending, the original ending for Endgame, as well as rewrite a lot of the upcoming issues afterwards to work around the fact that she was not dead, but instead put into a coma because of her near-death experience. And one of the reasons I show this off is because at the time when Endgame was released in the 4 issues that it was in, Sega had a indoor theme park in several parts of the world. I think they had one in Vegas, in the UK, and they had one in Sydney, Australia. And the one in Sydney, Australia, actually proved to be the one that was very popular amongst the fans, especially the Sonic Satayam fans and the comic book fans, and mostly fans of this character. Why? Because they had a stage show, because the Sega World, the indoor theme park Sega World, had an indoor stage show called Sonic Live in Sydney, or Sonic in Sydney. And even though I've never seen the show, and I don't know if there's any clips here on YouTube or anywhere that show us what the show looked like, basically it was a stage show that, from what I understand, had people in costumes portraying the characters on stage and singing musical numbers. but then later on went into more of a puppet show, like puppet theater like show environment. And one of the characters involved in the show was Sally. Yeah, Sally was a main character. And in and believe it or not, in Sydney, Australia, because of that, is where you could only get a plush like this, as well as other merchandise with her likeness on it. Like you could get mugs, you could get I think you get clothing. Like I said, you can get drinking cups, sippy cups, buttons. You could get, like I said, you can get jean suspenders or whatever they're called with her likeness on there. And everybody, and I'm sure a lot of people is doubting that that's a fact. Well, if you look here, I don't know if you can see that very well. I don't know if you can see that very well, but if you read that, and we can get it up close here, it says 1997 Sega. 1997 Sega. And that was a year, basically, like I said, that Endgame had also been released. So you could probably understand why Sega wasn't too happy. From what I know, from what I've read, Sally's merchandise in the Sydney, Australia market, especially with Sonic Live at the Sega World indoor Sega World theme park, was a high seller. People enjoyed it, and especially with eBay. I think eBay was just coming in at that time. Uh, Sally's merchandise, like this plush here, like plushes like that, were proving to be hot commodities. And I've said this before. About I would say about 8 years after the show was live in Australia, this was one of the plushes. 8 years after the show was live in Australia, this was one of the plushes that was online. So one night I went on eBay, saw it, and it's like the Lord above told me, do what you can to get it. And I think and thank God I was able to bid enough to get the Sally plush there. I was able to get her for like a little over $250. I know it's a lot of money for a plush, but like I said, it's rare because it's a Sega licensed product, but it's of a character that was mostly a comic book and Sonic Saturday morning cartoon exclusive character, even though as you saw with the tag, it said 1997 trademark of Sega. It's a TM trademark 1997 of Sega. So it showed you the importance that the character had. I'm sure if they had characters like Bunnie, Rabbot, Rotor, and Antron a part of that show and merchandise selling there as well at that time, it'd be the same way. So, yeah, Ken Penders basically got in trouble for what he had done back then. But like I said, it was around this time frame. Let's just say it was around this time frame that things started to get more serious in tone. Things started to get more serious, more dramatic, and the comic was doing very well. There was no doubt about it. It was the sales were doing good and everything. It wouldn't be until about, how do I put this? It wouldn't be until about 75 to where the status quo kind of changed up a little bit. Basically, basically a little bit of spoilers here. At the end of Endgame, and you can even see the director's cut, because Ken Penders actually released as part of one of the Sonic Super Special issues, because one of the things that Archie did, and they did this with any comic that they had, even if it was their own or a licensed book, they would release 48 page comics every now and then. So one of the things that Sega did or allowed Ken Penders to do was release 48 page specials of stories. Whether they were one mega story or a multitude of stories, they would allow him to do it. So Ken Penders took this opportunity to release a director's cut of Endgame, the 50th issue, the final part, because there were some parts in it that were cut out due to the fact that he had to overhaul the story because of what he had done. So he was able to do that. And what happened, like I was saying, is in at the end of the Endgame issue, Robotnik, the Robotnik of the comics, and kind of in a sense almost similar to the Satyam interpretation as well, was killed off. He had lost a final battle to Sonic, and what happened is 25 issues later they brought him back, but it was not him. We found out basically around issue 25 that it was actually another Robotnik from another dimension who had destroyed his Sonic, but in a sense had also roboticized himself. So now he had the ability to download his conscience into any electronic object, whether it be something like this or whatever that he needed to uh, transfer into. So what he did basically, long story short, is the way they panned this out is at the end of 75, they had Sonic basically defeat him again, or defeat Robo Robotnik, but instead of completely destroying him, Robo Robotnik had saved his conscience, and downloaded it into what's known as the Dr. Eggman body, and thus that comics version of Eggman was born. And the way this was all happening was the fact that, and the way this story came about was all the roboticized citizens, the Robians, as they called them, including Sonic's parents and his Uncle Chuck, well, mostly Uncle Chuck, had been reprogrammed into being roboticized slaves. So what happened is Sonic was able to, even though Sonic wasn't able to get his Uncle Chuck back, he got his parents back because the MacGuffin, if you will, was power rings were always the antidote to roboticization and the loss of free will. So yeah, basically this tied into a little short story that they did where Sonic had these along with a human friend, a human friend had crafted these wedding bands for his parents and had those kind of placed on his roboticized parents, and thus that prevented them from falling under the control of Robotnik. So, so what happened is, long story short, and I know I'm saying that a lot, I do apologize. They just followed Uncle Chuck to see what was going on, why he was acting so strange, and thus, they got their answer. And they basically had to play along in making Robotnik, Eggman, kind of think they were under his control when they weren't. I know it's kind of convoluted. That was one of the things a lot of fans complained about the Comic Times, was it would get convoluted, a little confusing, but there you go. So yeah, basically it was also during this time, I'm just going to fast forward as quickly as I can. Basically it was during this time they started to kind of go a little bit more, like I say, more of that dramatic route. Sorry for the lag there. More of that dramatic route, high school route, if you will. Again, sorry for the lag. More of that dramatic route, more of that high school drama route. Because one of the things they did, and a lot of fans do not like this, including Mega Beatman, didn't like this, was the fact that they started incorporating high school into the equation. Basically, what happened is Sally's father ended up getting injured, ended up getting poisoned or something like that. Basically, Sally's father was put out of commission doing an invasion on the now rechristened Robotropolis. They tried to get back the kingdom from Eggman, and he was injured. So what happened is one of Ken Pender's characters, Jeffrey St. John, tried to take advantage of Prince Elias's experience as a leader and to get things done a certain way or have things done a certain way. So what happened, long story short, is this caused Sonic and his friends to go back to school. Basically, the freedom fighters, in a sense, were disbanded from active duty and forced to go back to school. And one of the key things that played into this was Sally was going to school as well, but she was being homeschooled at the castle. And one thing I've always pointed out, and a lot of fans pointed out about this when you want to look into that, is Jeffrey St. John, his character, had always been infatuated with Sally. He had had a crush for her, had an attraction to her since he first met her in the Prelude backup stories that led into Sally's miniseries. And you can kind of say that he was kind of taking advantage of of a certain situation here to try to be close to her, and it kind of backfired in his face and kind of basically caused him and his team to be put out of commission due to a virus that somehow infected them in their bodies. Sorry for the lag there. Then infected them in their bodies, and they had to be cleansed of that, so they were put out of action. Thankfully, what happened is they decided to finally address something that fans knew about for quite some time, and there was another character that Ken Penders had created called Hershey the Cat. So they decided, okay, we're going to address the situation. And what they addressed was Hershey had always had feelings for Jeffrey, and Jeffrey kind of probably knew that, but didn't want to acknowledge it because he had feelings for Sally. But finally, they did address it, and basically, they were finally able to get Jeffrey and Hershey as a couple. And long story short, they were able to get them married off around, I think it was about issue 29. Or issue 129, I should say, 128, 129. They were finally able to get them married off. Now, speaking of romance, that was one of the things as well that a lot of fans did not like about this comic sometimes, unless it was done right. I had no problem with it. You know, as long as they stuck to certain status quo as far as romance went, I was cool with it. You know, when when they would have Sonic and Sally together, I was cool with that because that's what I saw in the Sonic Saturday Morning cartoon series. But the biggest difference of how they did in the Sonic Saturday Morning cartoon series is they did it in a sense that you knew there was an attraction, you knew there was some kind of relationship there, but it wasn't shoved in your face and really wasn't touched upon until at least the last episode um, of the series, which was the Doomsday Project. Here, at times, depending on who the writers were, it would either be shoved down your throats, it would be kind of acknowledged but not shoved down your throats, basically done the right way, or basically they would ignore it and basically say, hey, and basically at least hint that there was something there, but we're not going to, we're not going to acknowledge it. You know, they would hint, but they wouldn't acknowledge it. It's kind of like it basically, what I was saying, it was like there would be at times it was done similar to what it was done in Sonic Sat AM, and it worked. There were times it would shove down people's throat, they didn't like it, and sometimes they would acknowledge it through hints, but what I'm saying is they would show hints that there was something there, but then they um, wouldn't say anything else about it. So basically, yeah, the romance was kind of up and down. You know, they even gave Knuckles a girlfriend, but in Julie Sue, which proved to be very over with the fans. Fans, whether they agree or not, whether they agree with it or not, actually liked Julie Sue. They actually liked her, and the way they kind of incorporated that relationship was, yeah, they're boyfriend girlfriend, but what it was is that the way they acknowledged a possible marriage between the two, or at least future possible marriage, was there's no marriage. It's basically about soulmate. It's basically like soul fire, if you will. That's how they acknowledged any kind of marriage kind of situation with Knuckles and his kind. But Sally and Sonic's was done in a sense to where if they ignored it for a while, or at least broke it off, and then they put it back together, you would be happy about it. I remember when they first did this, basically they had broke them off and then put them back together. I remember the first time I was happy about it was issue 122. I saw the cover, obviously knew what it was, read it, and I was like, yes, finally, yes, yes, yes. This is what it's meant to be. But unfortunately, they had to screw it up by having Sonic basically sacrifice himself to save the planet and go from there. But another way they screwed it up as well, and I will acknowledge this, is they had Sonic and Sally practically become engaged. Yeah, I'm not lying about that. Basically, about an issue or so later, they had Sonic and Sally become engaged. I think it was around issue 124, and Sally and Sonic, basically in front of Sally's parents, asked if they can have the blessing to be engaged. Basically, pre-engaged, whatever you want to call it. Some kind of, I can't think of the name right now, but it's some kind of fancy royal word that says, well, you're my husband to be, so, or you're my wife to be, so there you go. Not engaged, but basically acknowledge that you are going to be married. So yeah, they kind of screwed it up there, and that's what caused Sally's character to go OOC, out of character, for quite some time. And it wouldn't be until about Ian Flynn's debut that they would fix this. They would actually fix this, in a sense. They would fix it because one of the last stories that Penders did, because I think Penders got a lot of flack for this, was a story to where we find out that when Sonic came back, time-wise, because Sonic basically, when he sacrificed himself in 125, he didn't die onto another planet. Like, I think the number was 85,000 light years. He was blasted away. So what happened is, time-wise, a year had passed on Mobius, on his planet. So when Sonic came back, a year had passed, and during this year that had passed, Antoine, Bunnie's boyfriend, had been replaced by his anti-hero, his anti-self, Patch, or the evil Antoine from another dimension. And this evil incarnation was doing anything he can to get into power. So long story short, Sally, realizing that her father was in no condition to lead anymore, and her brother, many issues before, had put himself into exile because of some of the wrong decisions that he had made. Like I said, put himself into exile, had to come back and reassume the throne because his father wasn't in no condition to lead anymore. And Sonic basically felt that there was something off about this whole, why are we suddenly doing this marriage deal? So what happened is Sonic ends up discovering who this Antoine really is, because when Elysis comes back, reinserts himself into the picture and reclaims what's rightfully his because he's the firstborn. Patch, evil Antoine, doesn't take too kind to this, tries to act all cool and everything, but Sonic notices something sticking out of his sleeve as he's going to shake Elysis' hand, sees that it's a needle, puts two and two together, and there you go. And yes, the marriage is annulled. So it's after that story, like I said, I'm trying to go as quickly as I can, that Ian Flynn comes on board as the head writer, and Ian Flynn basically starts fixing some of the messes that Ken Penders left behind, starts trying to fill in the gaps, fill the plot holes, this and that, and basically reestablish the friendship, if not the relationship, between Sonic and Sally. And the way he did this was he started to throw hints here and there with certain issues. And one of the things he did with the 175 to 177 three-part anniversary issue was, at the end of it, he had Sally he basically gave Sally back her old hairstyle. Basically, there's a scene in the story where Sally's sitting on a tree branch with Bunnie and Antoine, and I guess she's finally letting out a little of her. She's finally admitting some of her wrongdoings that she had done, and she said, And one of the things she asked Bunnie was if Bunnie still planned on being her royal dresser, basically just styling her hair and all that. Bunnie said, yeah, that's still her goal. Oh, and Sally said, well, I've got a good idea for you. How about you start now with me? How about you start right now? And basically, she had Bunnie give her back and basically, Ian Flynn had Sally get her old hairstyle back thanks to Bunnie. Basically, it's like, and I think Sally said something as more of an indication of she's back to being her old self again. And that was, I think, Ian Flynn's way of saying, you got the old Sally back now. She's not the Sally you saw previously anymore. And it would basically take about several issues. It would take about, I would say, trying to think here, 177 to 97 is about 20 issues. To 07, 2000 to 207 is about 30 issues. To 217 is about 40. It would take about 45 issues till Sonic and Sally under Ian Flynn's watch would go back to being a couple. But again, unfortunately, even Ian Flynn couldn't avoid putting that relationship on hold, or at least demolishing it. Because what happened is about 3 issues later, we have the 225th issue where we have the first Genesis wave. But thankfully, at least Ian Flynn doing the Sonic Genesis 4-issue story that took place afterwards and kind of softly rebooted some of the world, at least had that attraction between Sonic and Sally still there. And, at least he acknowledged that at least he still had it there. But unfortunately, again, he had to put some tragedy along with it. I think if there's anything that Ian Flynn took away from Ken Penders was you had to now put some tragedy with Sonic and Sally being back together as a couple. You had to put some kind of drama into it, some kind of tragedy. And in this case, it was Sally's turn to be part of that because, first it was Sonic kind of sacrificing himself to save the planet from being blown up or being sucked into a black hole thanks to an alien race that just hated this planet or just hated the planet for some reason. Well, they didn't have they had a reason. Basically, the reason was one of their own many years before had been captured and dissected on and all that. So they basically wanted to get rid of the planet in retaliation. So so they used this quantum dial to try to erase the planet from existence, create a black hole. So Sonic sacrificed himself to save the planet and destroy this quantum dial in issue 125. And he ended up, because of that, like I said earlier, being blasted 86,000 light years away. So fast forwarding now to this, 230 comes around, and Sally sacrifices herself to save the planet from complete robotization, and thus ends up being roboticized herself. And this was a move that not many fans were happy about. I wasn't happy about it, but of course there were fans that were happy about it because it was something different, even though we had seen it before in issue 29, even though that was just a short-term deal, and they had a Deus Ex Machina, if you will, that restored Sally to normal. Here it was a little bit more complicated than that. And what happened afterwards was basically a rinse and repeat. They would go, basically what I mean by rinse and repeat is they would try to get Sally back, fail, try to get Sally back, fail. They would follow them from village to village all over the planet, and fight off Sally, try to fight her off and capture her and get her back so they can restore her. Rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. So they did all this, and during this time as well, they had Robotnik, or Eggman, if you will, weaponize Sally. Now, some people would say that the way they had Ken Penders, not Ken Penders, but the way they had Eggman do this was they had him basically take Sally apart and rebuild her. And, that's a lot of people's opinion, and they're welcome to it. My opinion on it is the way I saw it in the panel is he was measuring her as if he was measuring to put like some kind of outfit on her, and that all he did was weld on a weaponized outfit, and all he did was weld on a weaponized armor on top of her original body. That's all he did. The only thing he may have added was a head cannon on the top of her, inside of her, and that's about it. If he did that at all, or if that was already incorporated into her thanks to her robotization, we don't know. But yeah, it was basically rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. And just like Ken Penders had plans for after Endgame, had some plans originally penciled out and everything for after Endgame, Ian Flynn had plans penciled out and ready to go for the rest of the Mecha Sally Death Egg Mark II World Tour II arc as well. Unfortunately, that didn't come to be because, as we all know, there was in case you don't know, there was a lawsuit between Ken Penders, Archie Comics, and Sega all the way around, and that caused Ian Flynn to have to take all of the original plans that he had, put it on the back burner, and just like Ken Penders had done before him, rewrite everything differently to the point that at the same time Sega Archie Comics had come up to Ian Flynn, who was both working on the Sonic comics, the main Sonic comics, Sonic Universe, even doing some Sonic X, and then eventually Sonic Boom. And they had come up to him and said, "Hey, would you like to do Mega Man as well?" And he would work on Mega Man. So they decided to come up to him and say, "Hey, you want to do a crossover between the two?" Long story short, you ended up getting Worlds Collide out of this, which was a crossover, and basically Ian Flynn's Deus Ex Machina as well to try to fix any of the lawsuits try to avoid any more of the lawsuit. Basically, Worlds Collide, which was the first crossover between Mega Man and Sonic, was basically Ian Flynn's way of, like I said, erasing what was going on and incorporate and basically use this crossover into incorporate a new soft reboot or retcon to the comic. And that's what happened. Basically, after 4 issues of the main comic and 4 issues of Universe and 4 issues of Mega Man, we ended up getting a rebooted, retooled, or softly rebooted Sonic the Hedgehog comic. And basically the way it played out was the character of Nicole, who had evolved from a handheld to who she is now, which is a HoloLynx, who can make herself as real as everybody else, thanks to a special programming. Nicole basically was basically the key to everybody except for Sonic and herself. Basically everybody, with the exception of Knuckles as well, because I don't know why they didn't do it to him, but then again, I guess to avoid any legal mess, which was a smart move, I guess, and if you want to look at it that way. Basically Nicole was the key to reestablishing the memories of the old timeline to characters like Sally, Tails, Rotor, Bunnie, Antoine, and Amy. So at least there was some kind of connection. The only thing that they threw in there, courtesy of Sonic and Tails and the other characters, was the fact that they acknowledged that even though they had memories of the old world restored or kept, that those memories were starting to slowly fade away or be replaced by newer, reestablished versions of those memories that they had of the old world. They would be replaced by new recreated versions in this world. So yeah, basically it's all basically, like I said, Nicole was the key to what was going on. And what happened afterwards is they went into what was known as the Shadow World Crisis arc, which had a lot of sub arcs that took place in Sonic Universe, took place in the main comic, and basically started to become more of a Sonic Unleashed adaptation, especially starting around, I think, what was it, 253 or so, or 252, 253. There was, it started to become more of a, it started to acknowledge, we started to get the idea that we were going to get a Sonic Unleashed arc, and that's what we did. It would be around, I think, the 260s or something like that, where we'd finally, at least, uh, get that full acknowledgement or full idea that, yeah, you're getting a hold on here, I don't know what that was. As I saw something pop up there. Anyway, but you were getting a, not only were you getting a a story arc that was going to reestablish the world in its new soft retcon rebooted way, but you were also getting a story arc, but you were also getting a Sonic Unleashed adaptation as well to go with it. And as good and as decent as this was, I'm not going to crap on it or anything. As decent as this was, one of the things that they did to kind of interrupt it was they did another Sonic Mega Man crossover, which was more focused on the Mega Man side of things this time than anything else. And this time was supposed to be, I guess, supposed to be bigger and better because it incorporated not just the characters from the last crossover, which was the main game characters, but it also incorporated the comic characters and the other characters, the comic book exclusive characters from both comics, as well as it incorporated other game characters from other games like Street Fighter, uh, uh, what was an Alex Kid or Kid Alex or something like that. Um, what was the other one? Beautiful Joe and Golden Axe and all that. And the reason they said this was also bigger is they also incorporated Sonic Boom with the with Styx, the Badger, representing them. So overall, even though the comic was doing well, it got interrupted by this crossover, which had nothing. This crossover event, which didn't affect the Sonic comics as much as it affected more of the Mega Man comics this time. Excuse me. It affected the Mega Man comics more this time, and like I said, it didn't really have any significance here. It really didn't. So yeah, they just went from there. Uh, Another thing that obviously was established was, with the exception of Sonic and not Sonic, but with the other thing that they kind of established was, with the exception of Bunnie and Antoine's marriage, which they continued on from the old timeline and continuity, which took place in issue 174, I believe. Um, with that exception, there was no real romance thrown in here. I mean, you got hints that there was something between Sonic and Sally, obviously. And you even threw in hints maybe they were going to do a Sonic Amy or something like that, or Tails Amy at times. Or even a Tails and Honey the cat, if you will. Or something like that. You know, they threw in hints and all that and teases, but they never really went anywhere with it. And one of the reasons Ian Flynn said he didn't want to do it is he wanted to avoid the whole romance convoluted crap, because he was sick and tired of the shipping wars. He was sick and tired of the fact that people kept saying they wanted this ship or they wanted this ship. They wanted Sonic with this girl, or Sonic with that girl, Sally with this guy, or Amy with this guy. They were sick and tired. Ian Flynn was basically sick and tired of it. And I don't think anybody can blame him, but I think if you would have just kept Sonic and Sally together in some way, I think it would have worked. I mean, you didn't have to you wouldn't have to worry about, oh, people are going to say you got to ship this person or ship this character with that character. You're always going to have that. But I think if you would have done it in a way, or any future writer had the comic stayed under the Archie license, done it in any kind of way, I think they could have done it correctly. I think they could have done it in a way that at least said, hey, we're going to take a page out of the earlier issues of the Sonic comic, and we're going to basically make it more like it was in the Sonic Saturday cartoon, to where you knew it was there, but it wasn't in your face. So I think they could have done Sonic and Sally, but done it in a way to where it wasn't in your face, uh, Ace, but you knew it was there. But overall, I can't really say any more about the show, about the comic for anybody else that may or may not know about it, or the characters involved. I can't really say anything more, because the way I look at it is, the way I look at the comic and the cartoon series in the history of the history overall is, it's always good. I look at it this way: any comic book based on any kind of medium, whether it's movies or video games, toys, what have you, are always going to have a convoluted history depending on how you look at it. And sometimes it all depends on who the writers are. Whether it's If it's one main writer, then or at least writers that can coexist or work off each other, you're going to have a consistent story arc. You're going to have consistent continuity. But you have someone that's more focused on this portion of it than this portion, and then you have other writers come in and try to establish or reestablish what the comic's supposed to be about, then you're going to have a convolution here and there. As far as romance goes, you can have romance work, but you can have it work in a sense that, at least, like I said, you can acknowledge that there's something there between characters, but it's not, to a point that it's shoved right in your face. And I think that's where Ian Flynn could have really worked with the comic. He could have at least reestablished Sonic and Sally, or at least rebuilt them like he was doing up to about out 222, where he finally put them back together. But do it in a way that you're not saying, hey, here's Sonic and Sally in your face as a couple all the time. But instead do it in a way that's like, hey, here's Sonic and Sally, they're a couple, but now let's move on to this. And there you go. You wouldn't At least you're acknowledging the problem. At least you're acknowledging it there for people to understand. So, as far as the cartoon, as far as the comic goes, hopefully IDW will do a better job. I know a lot of people are wondering what we're going to find out at New York Comic Con, if not later on after that. But I'm hoping that at least, Chris, if you're watching, you'll bring these characters back, act either in guest appearances or at least full-on starring roles, or get co-starring roles, because that's how fans know them. So hopefully Chris Rael and IDW will do that. As far as the cartoon series go, I think the cartoon series, it's been about, believe it or not, 22 years since we last saw it. It was last officially on the air. And I will say this: the cartoon series, the Adventures one, you could tell Adventures was meant for a more younger audience. So you could see that right off the bat because of its crazy antics and all that. But Sonic SatAM definitely had the potential to go on for years and years and years. And a little trivia, and I think a little bit of trivia, in case some people didn't pick up on this. In one of the Family Matter episodes where they had Jolie White, Steve Urkel character, transform himself into Bruce Lee, it was where Steve Urkel was supposed to be the some kind of protector or guard a security person for a park, and you had this gang kind of gang up on him. So he decided, okay, he and Little Richie who was one of the main child characters in the show, along with a friend of his who became another child character in the show. Excuse me. Hold on for a sec. Let me go get something to drink. Be right back. I'm sorry about that. I have to get something to drink. Whew, a little woozy there. Been sitting here for most of the time. Anyway, sorry about that. But like I was saying, if a little bit of trivia, in case you guys don't know, um, like I was saying in the episode, in one Family Matters episode where Steve Urkel's, with the Julie White Steve Urkel character, basically uses his transformation chamber to become Bruce Lee. He's sort of like a security guard, a protection guard, if you will, for the park, so kids can play there safely. But instead, he's approached by this gang who's trying to take control of the park, basically take it over. So, long story short, he, along with the Little Richie character, who was one of the established child stars on the show, along with a friend of his, who was also established, who's a new child star on the show, decided to use the transformation chamber to turn into Bruce Lee. And little bit of tidbit here is you have Jolie White, who was Steve Urkel in the show, as well as the voice of Sonic the Hedgehog on Sonic SatAM. There's a moment where, as Bruce Lee, they're fighting the gang, and one of the members of the gang was Jason David Frank, Tommy Oliver of Power Rangers. So basically, you had Jolie White Sonic taking on Tommy of Power Rangers and beating him. So there's a little bit of trivia there for you guys. And you can check out that scene here on YouTube and other streaming sites. It's Family Matters Bruce Lee transformation or something like that. But yeah, sorry for the lag there. But yeah, as far as SatAM goes, the show I think had potential to go on for several seasons. I really think it had the potential to go on for several seasons, and unfortunately, it was cut short. And according to Ben Hurst, he had plans for season 3, plans to where Tails would discover a power he never had, because you could see that they were planting the seeds. Obviously, there's even a deleted scene in storyboard mode that they were going to use to focus on the relationship of Sonic and Tails a little bit more. And I think the episode Droodhenge, and that was supposed to be a little bit of an Easter egg, or a little bit of a hint as to what would be coming in the 3rd season. Unfortunately, the 3rd season never came to be. And the plans that Ben said he had ready to go was Tails was going to discover a power that he didn't know he had inside of him, while rescuing the freedom, which would allow him to rescue his friends from a disaster. Sally would have a new potential love interest, Sonic would have a new rival for Sally's affections introduced, or maybe reintroduced. I think we kind of had an idea of maybe who that could be, at the end of Doomsday, where Sonic and Sally are kissing each other, and they're starting to glow because of the Power Stones that are still kind of infused inside of them. I think we kind of had an idea of who that can be. We find out that Naugus was going to potentially be the new antagonist down the line. And we found out that Snively was going to be the antagonist for like the first couple of episodes, and then Naugus would come on board. And according to I think what Ben-Hur said, that Snively was going to later, because of this defect, over to the Freedom Fighters and help them out. I don't know how that was going to work. So he had all these plans. I think he even had plans to hint at Knuckles' existence in the third season. And I think Amy was supposed to come later on as well, maybe towards the end of the third season, maybe into a fourth season had that happened. So I can't really say, but he had a lot of these plans going forward, all set and ready to go. But unfortunately, like I said, the show was cut; its legs were cut off right before it could really take off, and see what kind of potential it had. So yeah, it didn't really get a chance to. I mean, it got a chance to shine. There's no doubt, but it didn't really have much of a chance to really establish itself as a player on Saturday mornings. Some could say Power Rangers is to blame for that. Obviously, that's true, but I think ABC and Dick Entertainment, whether they were going to keep the show or not. Let's say ABC decides. Let's say ABC decided to keep the show for a third season. They could have easily shoveled it or moved it over into a later time slot, so it wouldn't run face. It wouldn't run It wouldn't run face to face with Power Rangers. So I think ABC could have easily, even before then, moved it to a later time slot, and it probably would have. It probably would have worked. I mean, probably would have had more viewers. Um, but unfortunately, that didn't happen. And like I said, Ben-Hur had all these plans. Sorry for the lag there. He had all these plans for Sonic to, like I said, have a new rival of Sally's affections. Tails to discover a power inside of him he didn't have. Knuckles possibly to make an appearance later towards the end of the third season. Maybe even Amy as well. Snively to start out as antagonist, and then Naugus to come on and be the new antagonist, with Robotnik as his lackey, and basically an overall new ball game, as Ben-Hur put it, would be set in motion for the characters. So overall, I can't really say much about it. The final four episodes of Sonic SatAM, I look at the fact that they could have been done as a movie. As a matter of fact, hold on for a sec. Okay. I know it's here somewhere. And if you hear that, that's a noon whistle. If you heard that, that was the noon whistle. So I do apologize for that. I have something what I'm looking for in here somewhere. Oh, wait, I think I know where I put it. Can't find it here. I think I know where I put it. Hold on, folks. This is what happens when you do a lot of moving around, or at least do a lot of stuff. Yeah, there it is. Put it in my closet. Crazy me. Yeah. Basically, sorry about that. But like I was saying, the final four episodes, I felt, you know, of Sonic Set AM season two, I felt could have been done better if they were like this. This was actually something I put together myself, and I did it very carefully. In fact, I had several attempts trying to do it. And basically, what it is the final four episodes put together as a movie. And the way I carefully edited it is I didn't use no software or anything, in case you're wondering. Instead, I had a DVD recorder, so I hooked up my other DVD player, and as carefully as I could, I did the intro for the Doomsday Project episode, which was the finale. So I did the intro for the show, showed the title card for Doomsday, and then very carefully, split second, as soon as it faded to black, paused it, went to Cry of the Wolf, went to the beginning, not to the intro or the title card, but went straight to as soon as the title card that said Cry of the Wolf went to black. That's when I unpaused and right from there. And I did that several times with the other episodes. As soon as the episode would end and fade to black before going to credits, I would pause it and then unpause it after the title card would show up for the next episode. Thus, consistently keeping it like a movie. And I think I did pretty good with what I did here. But what I'm saying is that, oh, I don't have any coffee or anything on my coffee cup, I should say. But anyway, yeah, the final four episodes were good. A lot of people say that season two was basically one. I think even Ben Hurst said season two was one big continuity deal, and in a sense it was. Except I look at Blast of the Past, which took place in the middle of the season, as something they could have done at the beginning of season two, and at the beginning of season two, and not in the middle. So yeah, they could have easily done Blast of the Past as a two-part season premiere, and not in the middle. So, but I look at the Doomsday Project, and at the Doomsday Project saga, as I like to call it, and I think if ABC really cared about any of the Saturday morning licenses that they had at the time that were doing good, and maybe wanted to consider keeping this around, they could have aired, and I think if Dick Entertainment cared as well, I think they could have aired these final four episodes as a movie on prime time, maybe on TGIF, or maybe the day before, or the day before Friday, or it's on TGIF Friday or whatever. And I think people would have tuned in and watched, and they probably would have got a new set of audience. But overall, all the episodes are done perfectly well, and they flow perfectly right into each other. No matter what you may think of them, or what have you, they flow perfectly right into each other. So I do recommend checking out the final four episodes of Sonic Set AM. If you got the DVD set, you can watch them almost consistently as a movie, like back to back to back. Or if you want to, you could watch them on Stars as well. But yeah, the cartoon series I really would recommend. Sonic Set AM, I recommend to anybody. I really do. If you want to know more about the characters, I recommend that. I recommend hunting down the comics if you can. There are some online sites as well that have the comics for free. There was one site, I don't know if they got the comics back up now because, well, Sonic's no longer with Archie. So, along with Archie Comics, I should say, or under the Archie Comics banner. But let me know. But hopefully they do got them up. If not, like I said, I recommend checking out the comics best you can. Try to find a site that will have them, and you'll be surprised about how good those comics are, especially depending on who the writer is. You get a better sense. One thing that not Ken Penders, but Ian Flynn did was when he did the Sonic comic origins, at least he gave us an idea of who the characters were, how they came about, and basically not only reintroduced them and probably a new part of them to the older and established readers, but did a good job as well as reestablish as but did a good job as well as introducing them to the newer generation or the newer audience out there. So that's really all I have to say. Hopefully, to a lot of people like BobSheaux, Linkara, Toon Critic, and anybody else watching, Chris Rael, as to who these characters are, what this series was about, both all the way around. And again, hopefully IDW, Chris Rael, they bring these characters in as mainstays for the comic, or at least in guest appearances down the line. But we'll have to wait and see. But hopefully you guys enjoyed watching this live. Thank you to everybody that did watch live. Let me know what you guys think down below. Comment if you like. Thank you to all that watched post live, I should say. Basically, after this was seen live, thank you for all those that were watching it post live as well as watching it live right now. But really, hopefully, this helped out BobSheaux, this helped out Toon Critic, this helped out Linkara, this helped out Chris Rael, and anybody else that wants to know some info on the characters and the series and all that and the history. Hopefully, I did the best I could to give you that information in the time I was spent on here talking about it. So let me know what you guys think down below. Comment if you like. I'm out. God bless. Take care.